Yay! So, chapter 9, after 3 different readings, has uploaded, and hopefully, you guys listened to it. It ended with a cliffhanger, which means it ended with some suspense, because the last sentence was until the day we learned that I had been officially sentenced to death. So, Judy may die in chapter 10, and that's what we will find out. All right, chapter 10, Shoot the Dog. This is not sounding really good, and I have not read it yet, so I do not know. So I am on the edge of my seat. I want to find out what happens to Judy. With the Allies so close to liberating us, the Japanese and Korean guards got even meaner. So liberating means freeing them because they will have won the war. And remember, the Allies, they're from the Great Britain, the Judy and her soldiers. The United States is on that side too. We had all been infected with lice from the moment we stepped into the jungle. And lice are those little bugs that lay eggs in your hair. Now, for some unknown reason, they suddenly decided it was time to rid the men and the camp of the annoying little creatures. Maybe they thought our liberators, the people who were coming to rescue them, would treat them with respect if we were rescued in halfway decent condition. But given the fact that the men were skeletons, that seemed unlikely. One day, a few of the POWs were given razors with orders to shave every head and every eyebrow, so where there's hair. Others were tasked with burning all of the men's bedding and the rags that passed for clothing, because lice live in bedding and clothing too. Then 2 of the guards squared off in front of Frank. He stiffened, and I sensed danger was near. Shoot the dog, ordered one of the guards to the other. It's filthy and covered with lice. They both gave Frank big smiles. We'll cook her. You'll eat the first bite. That's really sweet. Disappear, Judy, Frank yelled. I could tell by the tone of his voice that he meant it, and I did, knowing that he would get a beating for warning me away. For the next 3 days, rifle-carrying guards walked up and down the railway whistling for me. I'm not stupid enough to fall for your tricks, I thought. I was too sneaky for them, but every once in a while one of them thought they saw me and fired. I worried about what the sound of those guns would do to Frank. I was sure that every time he heard a gun go off, he thought I was dead. If it wasn't so dangerous, I would have crept into camp at night to let him know I was okay, but I couldn't. They stopped looking one day when they discovered a tiger on their trail, but I still didn't think it was safe to return. Mostly I worried about Frank. Did he think I was dead? Was he giving up? I'm alive, my friend, I wanted to tell him. Just hang on. I'm okay. Don't worry about me. I was hovering on the edge of the jungle late that third night when I heard quiet, sneaky voices. The guards were packing up and leaving. They slithered away like snakes in the dark. I waited until dawn to make sure they were really and truly gone, and then I ran into the center of camp. Wake up, I barked. The kickers are gone. I love how she still refers to them as the kickers. I was so happy I jumped around in circles barking. The prisoners slowly limped out of their huts, wondering what new horrors the Japanese were trying to inflict upon them and me. Instead, they found a camp empty of guards. The guards left. Frank ran over and I leaped upon him. We rolled around like we had when we were reunited at the camp in Singapore. We're alive and we're together, I barked. A few minutes later, we heard the sound of an engine. I could tell that it was different from the Japanese trucks. Oh. I led the men into a clearing just beyond the camp where we found 2 British soldiers sitting in a jeep. So remember, British soldiers are from Great Britain. That's why they call them British. And that's on the side of the war that Frank and Judy are fighting with. And these soldiers are friendly soldiers. These are good soldiers. Let's see. The war's over, mates, they told us. The Japanese surrendered. That's why the guards slithered off. They were worried that they were going to get in trouble from the British soldiers. It was August 15th, 1945. Men dropped to their knees, laughing and crying. They hugged each other and the British soldiers who had found us. I stayed by Frank's side, wagging my tail at these new friends. "We're free!" someone shouted. And then all of the men picked up the cheer. "We're free! We're free!" The war in the Pacific had lasted for 1,364 days. So if you divide 1,364 by 365, that's how many days there are in a year. That'll tell you how many years the war in the Pacific lasted. I had been a prisoner for most of it, and now I was finally free. All that day and night, planes flew overhead, dropping parachutes with crates of food. Real, wonderful food like meat, cheese, and eggs, because remember, they've eaten rice for years. There was chocolate and bread and butter and jam and coffee. The men loved the coffee. The yucky brown liquid had no appeal for me. At first, the food made them sick because their bodies weren't used to eating good food. But slowly their bodies got used to being nourished again. Even I got a little queasy. Her stomach was a little upset, but it was worth it for a full belly. "Hey, you know something?" Frank said to me. "Now that the war is over, you can have your own rice ration. You don't need to share with me." I thumped my tail in response, and I don't have to catch any more rats. Clothing also came to us from the sky, which was a good thing because the men were all naked after the lice incident, so they didn't have any clothes because they burned all their clothes. Bedding, so some beds, medical equipment, even portable kitchens and bathrooms were parachuted from the sky. So the planes would drop over and drop the supplies for them, or would fly over and drop the supplies for them. The men were grateful, but what they really wanted was to go home. "When?" they asked. "Soon," was the reply. Thankfully, that was the truth. After about a week, we sailed to Singapore and went straight to the hospital. Frank was recovering from malaria, which is a disease that you catch, I believe, from mosquitoes, and we both needed to gain some weight. Then there was talk of sending him home. Dogs weren't allowed on airplanes, so Frank refused to take one. "Aw, I'll wait for a ship," he said. "I'm not leaving Judy." Finally, after about a month in Singapore, we were playing catch one afternoon when a medical orderly, so someone who helps with the doctors, handed Frank his embarkation papers, so he gets to go home. "Here we go, girl," Frank said, reading the orders. "To leave for England aboard the troop ship Antenor." Then his face crumpled. There was a footnote. "No dogs, birds, or pets of any kind to be taken aboard." "I'm not leaving you behind, Judy," Frank whispered to me. "It's time for another smuggling operation." So they're going to try to smuggle or sneak her back on that ship. I licked his hand to let him know that I understood. "I'm ready. Just tell me what to do." On the day we were set to leave for England, Frank asked 4 of his friends to help. We strolled to the docks. I trailed behind, pretending to be a stray dog out for a walk. When we got close, I avoided the military police and slipped behind some duffel bags near the gangway. I watched Frank board and show his papers to the 2 guards at the top of the gangway. I kept my eyes on him and waited. Frank's friends walked up the gangway together for a few minutes later and started a conversation with the guards. So they're distracting the guards and getting them chatting. They kept pointing back to the city and pulled the guards away from the gangway to show them something. That's when Frank gave me the signal. It was a low whistle. The guards were too busy talking to hear it, but my super dog ears wouldn't miss that sound. I scrambled up the gangway and into the duffel bag and at Frank's feet. We had done it again. "We're going to England." So remember, England is another name for Great Britain. So Frank doesn't live in the United States. Frank lives over here in England, across the ocean from the United States. But England is a very nice country too. All right. Frank took me below decks, where I hid out with his gear. Over the next 6 weeks, we relaxed and ate and relaxed. We let the ship's cook know early on that I was a stowaway, and he saved the best bones for me. So he got all kinds of bones. By the time we neared Liverpool in England, Frank and I were both healthy again. I had forgotten how shiny and beautiful my coat could be. Frank realized he was going to have to reveal his secret if I was going to make it ashore. 3 days before we docked, He went to the captain and confessed. The captain was angry at first, but Frank told him all about me and how we'd kept each other alive. I went to visit him and gave him my prettiest smile. He radioed someone on shore and got permission for me to make landfall. There was just one problem. England said I had to stay in quarantine for 6 months. Quarantine is where you can't go out because you might be carrying germs. It's kind of like what you're doing for the coronavirus. It's a little bit stricter, though, where she can't leave. She'd have to be put in a certain room and she'd have to stay there for 6 months, which is a half a year, to make sure I was healthy and wouldn't pass any nasty diseases to English animals. Look at how beautiful I am, I wanted to tell him. I'm healthy. I knew it, Frank knew it, but England couldn't be sure, and the officials wouldn't budge. The ship anchored in Liverpool on October 29th, 1945, and Frank had no choice but to hand me over to the Ministry of Agriculture, so someone who works in the government who takes care of animals. My new prison was a lot nicer than the prisons in Sumatra, and I didn't have to hunt for rats to survive. But my real home was with Frank, and I missed him. He visited a lot, but it wasn't the same. You'll be home soon with me, girl, he promised every time he came. Not soon enough for me, I thought. Lots of other friends from Sumatra came to visit, too. It was good to see them all looking so fat and healthy, because remember, they'd gotten down to just skin and bones and really skinny when they were prisoners of war. Soon more and more people heard my story and wanted to visit. By the time I was released on April 29th, 1946, all the dog lovers in England had heard Frank's and my story. I was made an official member of the Royal Air Force, which is a pretty big deal, and even had my own uniform to match Frank's. There was a big ceremony the day I got out with lots of people taking pictures. Newspapers wrote stories about me, and I barked on the radio. I'm famous, I thought, and so is Frank. Crowds came to see me wherever I went, and I even spent some time with movie stars. But my favorite thing to do was visit children's hospitals. Small humans, with the exception of Frank, of course, are the best humans there are. So Judy really likes kids. On July 22nd, 1946, Frank and I were both demobilized by the military. That meant we could go home to Portsmouth in England, where Frank lived before the war, and that's exactly what we did. So she got to go home with Frank. After everything we had been through, we were finally home together. Isn't that a nice ending? That's a great ending. So Judy and Frank get to live in England in a house with not being prisoners of war, eating as much as they want, and they're happy now. What I'll do is I'll read the epilogue on another video. And then what you guys can do in the meantime, and I'll even read the historical note here to you at that time too, but there's actual pictures of the real Judy and Frank that you can take a look at in the back of the book, which is kind of neat. So I'll close up this video, and then I'll come back and read the epilogue on another video. Hope you guys enjoyed the story. I know I sure did. I love a good happy ending, and I love a true story like this where there's a happy ending. That always makes me excited. I'll talk to you guys with the epilogue soon. Bye.